We're going to try one more time with Gohan talking about an evolutionary argument for Christianity. Gohan, you're on the line one more time.
I'm here. I'm here.
Hey, you've been on the hold for 6.5
Uh,
motherfucking hours.
yeah, but two and a
Gohan,
half of those hours were my fault. Because if I answered the first time, it would have only been like 4. So,
There you go.
Gohan, we're
So,
speed running you this time, but tell us your question.
so I'm gonna say, one, how do you guys do this? I am white. I don't know how much energy I got left. You guys seem to be killing it right now. So, hats off
my
to
Gohan,
you.
leg's been
I'm pretty
vibrating the
white.
whole time.
I'm gonna.
we're built different. Like we
Uh,
unironically, it's in our DNA. We do this for the love of the fucking game. That's why we're
Yeah.
here.
It's
were
it's
you
a
guys
weird
the
situation.
kids that had no problem staying up late for studying for school? Like that was no problem for you guys?
Not at all. I do it anyway.
No,
I'm a night owl.
yeah,
I work better when it's dark.
it's also just part of
Okay.
the gig. You know, when you're in graduate school, you're going to be doing work and it's going to be late. And you're going to be one night you're going to get 5 hours of sleep, and then the next you're going to get like 9, and then you're going to get 1, and then you're going to get 4, and it's just all over the place. It's not healthy. Don't live like us.
No, it's a bad time.
Hats off to you guys, but yes, I'll try to do better with sleep than you guys do.
Please do. Do as we say, not as we do.
Yes, ma'am.
Unless we tell you to become an
I was gonna
atheist, then do that.
Erika, this is my first time talking to you, so hello. And Forrest, I think I've talked to you twice now, and hello again. I was also want to say I've never said this, but I've always wanted to say this. Kids, if you're watching this, it's way past your bedtime. Go to sleep.
That's
I loved
cute.
there was
Okay.
this there's this comedian I used to love named Victor Borga, and he would this old dude who played piano and stuff. My dad showed me, and he would start this act. He'd come out and be like, "Are there any children in the audience?" And everybody, "Yay!" And he'd go, "Ah, good, out." And like that's how he'd start the show. So good.
Funny guy. Okay. So my reason for the call today was um, kind of about my whole belief system with why I believe what I believe. I break it down into an acronym called SHAPE. The S is science. The H is history. The A is arguments for morality and reason. And the PE stands for personal experiences. So, like in short, if you ask me why I believe what I believe, it's because of that acronym. But today or tonight, I guess this morning, I'm calling to talk about particularly why I believe in theism based on the idea of evolution.
What was S
Okay,
again?
so
Could you tell me S again?
science,
Yep.
Okay, science,
Thank you.
history.
morality,
And
and
What
then
was A?
reason.
A kind of, yeah, A is cheating. I just needed an A. So I use arguments for morality and
Got it. Okay, perfect.
And then what was the P and the E? I'm sorry, I'm just taking. Is
Personal
it necessary
experience.
for me to know this? Personal experience.
no, no. I mean, I think it for me it's helpful, but yeah, it's not necessary for anybody to know it. But and it like personal experience, I think matters the least. I think arguments for morality and reason matter the most, followed by science, and then followed by history.
Right.
But so right now I'm talking mostly about science, and it will probably touch a little bit on reason, but mostly about science and evolution and how evolution makes one believe in um, creator God.
Cool.
Shoot.
Okay, so if I was to ask you guys, what, how did we evolve to um, get a system called inflammation? Can I hear you guys are both biologists? Can I hear both of your responses for like how we got inflammation?
Inflammation, like when you get hurt and you get inflammation. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah, like
Yeah.
that.
So
That's a advantage. for
Yeah,
us
so
as a species? How did we?
inflammation isn't like a thing. It's just the result of a lot of other things that are just your immune response. So you have macrophages moving in to this area. You also increase water, like osmotic pressure. You have water flowing in this area to allow those macrophages to move around, and increase blood flow into that area, to allow those macrophages to get there. More blood flow means faster
Yeah.
healing. So it's
So
the
how did we
inflammation is
get
just the
that?
result of your immune response.
So I understand what inflammation is. I'm asking, how did we evolve to get that?
So I
We
know nothing about inflammation, but I hopped on Google Scholar to see what I could find with a quick look. There's a paper by Rowley from '96, The Evolution of Inflammatory Mediators. And it says invertebrates do not display the level of sophistication and immune reactivity characteristic of mammals and other higher vertebrates. Their greater number of diversity of forms, however, reflect their evolutionary success, and hence they must have effective mechanisms of defense to deal with parasites, pathogens, and altered soft tissues. And they go on to say this brief review deals with the inflammatory responses of invertebrates and fish, concentrating on cell types involved in mediators of inflammation. So, effectively, what causes and then manages inflammation, in particular of eicosanoids, cytokines, and adhesion molecules. So, this seems to be a literature review on one of the most basic types of inflammation in invertebrates, which, just based on this abstract, seems to be it's basically just a base of what you see in mammals and higher vertebrates like birds and reptiles.
Okay. So I'm just trying to pick any example. Can I switch example to opposable thumbs? How did we
Yeah,
well,
evolve
I
that's
was
fine.
to
just
get
pulling up
opposable thumbs?
I just pulled up a paper called Coupling Inflammation with Evo Devo, which is talking about inflammation integrates diverse mechanisms that are associated not only with pathological conditions such as cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, blah, 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 but also with physiological processes like reproduction, i.e., oogenesis, embryogenesis, as well as aging. And so it talks about how, like, it goes on to talk about evolutionary developmental pathways and like how those tie into processes that allow for things like inflammation. And so this actually isn't a unique or irreducibly complex type of thing, which is just so beyond understanding. This is actually
Mm,
something that can be roped in. The inflammation pathway, which is the environmental factors, could be related to the evolutionary. Thus, inflammation could be the pathway by which the environmental factors could be related to the evolutionary development. If so, diverse human chronic inflammatory diseases nearby. And then he goes on to a bunch of other stuff. But it's we hypothesize that inflammation could represent a key tool used by nature to modulate organisms according to the environmental conditions in which they develop. And so inflammation might not only
that's the
be a
point.
symptom of the immune response, but also actually a functional mechanism of evolutionary development.
Of course, did you
So
see
that's
the
the point I
Gusev
was trying to
paper
get.
from 2019 from Biology Bulletin Reviews? Right underneath, that's very similar. It's the correlation of the evolution of the immunity and inflammation in vertebrates. So it seems to be an
I have
elaboration
that
on that one. I don't know if
I have that one right here. Yeah. And so I've got that one pulled up, and it says this paper discusses the sequence of developmental changes. Let me zoom in a little bit because I can barely see in the immune system, and inflammation of vertebrates, the formation of classic forms of adaptive immunity and inflammation for vertebrate species, the origin of cytotoxic T lymphocytes and T cell dependent variants. T cells, those are, if I remember correctly, no, those are dendritic cells I'm thinking about. I don't remember what the fuck T
go
cells
to
do right now. I'll get to it later.
go like one
But
one sentence down is killer. The each evolutionary stage.
let's
I'm
see here.
sorry.
Each
Can I jump
evolutionary
in
stage in the
quickly?
development of immunity and inflammation was determined by the need to organize the immune system to conform to the level of general organization of vertebrate species. So, yeah, exactly what we were just talking about earlier. This is not only what I was trying to get across in my first thing is inflammation isn't just a thing, it's the result of the immune system. Apparently, the product of that, the emergent property of that, also plays heavily into like evolution as a whole, and that's pretty fucking sick.
So what I think we're heading on two different paths. I'm not arguing irreducible complexity or anything like that. What I'm
No,
arguing
but you
is
asked how these things
it seems
evolved, and
like,
we're explaining.
yeah, yes. So my real question isn't exactly how they evolved. My so what I'm expecting for you guys to say was maybe something like it was advantageous. So we who had it set in our genes to have inflammation as a response for harm, that was
I'm
advantageous
sorry
to
that
us.
we
So
didn't give you
we
the
got
answer
to.
you were expecting. But like
It's okay.
that also wouldn't
So,
have been my answer, because at the end of the day, inflammation isn't always advantageous. Like, inflammation will kill you.
well,
That's the whole thing about immunology. The
regardless.
first and most important lesson of immunology is that your body will kill you in order to save itself. That's what it does.
So if let's just remove inflammation. Let's just say any advantageous adaptation we get. My
Sure.
question is, how did we get it? The common response I hear, and I read this in Richard Dawkins' book as well, is that because it was advantageous, so we were able to um, reproduce that advantageous gene as opposed to other species who did not get that gene. So they didn't get that advantage, so they weren't able to reproduce. So I'm saying that's
Or
not
they just reproduce
that's
less.
Yeah, it could
right.
just be less. And
Or
you
yeah,
do
right.
understand that when they're talking about advantageous, that is what they mean. Evolution is not survival of the fittest. Evolution is reproduction of the okayest.
Right. So my stance, which is like this is one reason why I believe that evolution is actually a pointer for believing there is a God, is that we do not reproduce to become advantageous. Sorry, we do not mutate to become advantageous. Yes, mutations, we need mutations in order to survive as a species, but the
No, we don't.
mutations that happen, we do. If you don't mutate, if you
You
don't
don't.
adapt, your species will die out. Your species
It's
will
it's
die out
entirely
if you
That's
don't
not
dependent.
adapt
true.
to it. Sorry.
Yeah, it's
That's
entirely
not.
How is
If
that
dependent
that
on the
not
if
true?
that
environment.
yeah, if that was true, then Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium wouldn't be a thing.
So if the environment changes and you don't adapt to it, will you survive?
That depends on the amount and degree of genetic drift possible.
And you might just not
Sure.
get the right
So
mutation
I
too.
mean,
Like if the
just saying
environment
like
changes
That's
too
also
humans,
much
true.
quickly, organisms go kaput regardless. I mean, you're not going to have
humans
a
Right.
were
mutation that's
super close,
Permian.
humans were super close to being extinct, correct?
Several times, yes.
Mhm.
So I mean, clearly we at least were bordering on the edge of extinction, not just humans, but stuff before us too. And if we didn't have certain mutations to help us through tough times, we wouldn't
There,
have been here
there's
today.
there's
That's
no
crossing
reason to
the line, in
say
my
that
opinion.
the near
Really not.
extinction events, the bottlenecks that human beings, that Homo sapiens experienced, there's no reason to say that those bottlenecks were survived because of mutation.
Okay, then back it up before that. Back it up to first couple of
Do
cells
you
of
just
life.
want, like, seriously? Do you want to just tell us what your script is, because it's not going well with you trying to get us to follow the script you want? So do
I,
you want to just tell us
I
what the point is?
Well, that's fair. Yes. So the point is, we do not adapt to survive. We adapt randomly through mutation. The vast majority of
Wrong.
mutations are either harmful or do no
there
harm
it is.
at
There it
all.
is.
But
Yeah,
no,
there it is.
eh,
Yeah, we do not adapt randomly. Mutations are random.
yeah.
Adaptations are driven by natural
This,
selection, which is non-random.
Yeah.
so this is why I stated before about my shape argument, because this is honestly a huge part of my S. So if you can prove me wrong, I'd be more than happy. So
I just did.
um,
Gohan,
can you explain to me
Gohan,
the natural
what Forrest
selection is a random process?
no. Natural selection is not a random process, and in fact, mutation
Okay.
isn't even random. It's probabilistic, right? Some portions of the
Mhm.
genome experience
Mutation
mutations
happens based
after.
off of gamma radiation. Is that correct?
Let me
Some
just let me
mutations
present with
happen from
you.
gamma radiation.
Can I present with you
How much?
can I present
How
a
many folks-
situation to you, Gohan? Here's
Sorry,
let's say you have
go
a group
ahead.
of let's say you have a group of foxes. It's a population of foxes, and they're living in a normal forest wherever you want. Pick a place. You know, it's nice. The climate is mild, whatever. All of a sudden, the environment changes, right? And these foxes, which naturally had some variation in their fur length, suddenly start to trend towards
How did that
having longer
happen?
and longer fur because those
How did
mutations
that
are
happen?
probabilistic
Oh my
because
fuck,
they
dude.
have mutation. they have variation as a part of their population due to things like mutation that offer no immediate fitness benefit but can under certain environments. Is it random which
So far,
foxes
I'm
will
on
be
board.
selected? Hold on just a sec. Go on. Is it random which foxes are selected for if the environment
Colors.
gets colder?
I would like to just say two things. One, no, it's not, but it is
Okay.
random on them getting the correct alleles to have the longer fur.
Yes,
That
that's true.
mutation was
So there,
random.
right. So, well, I would prefer the term probabilistic, but fine. Like, let's say it's random. The mutation is random, but natural selection isn't. Right. So that's what Forrest was
Right.
just saying moments ago. Is that the mechanism? Dividing up the
But
mechanisms of evolution. Some of them are random. Some of them are not. So, what?
natural
Where are we going to
selection,
go from here?
sorry, I'm still trying to work on butting in, but natural selection rests on mutation. Is that correct? If there's no
Not,
variance in population, there is no natural selection.
yeah, it relies on differential
And the,
reproductive success. So, yeah,
and the only
variation, which
way
is
to
supplied
get
by.
uh, difference in population is with mutation. And if mutation happens based off of random processes, or as you say, probabilistic processes, I say
Yeah,
potato, potato,
but yeah,
then
it did
it's
You,
still
you
for our
based off of
conversation.
mutation, which is based off of probabilistic slash random process.
Sure, for our conversation, I'm down with all of that, except what I feel like you're getting at is that it's like what survives isn't random. What survives has to be tinkered with because, you can't get all of this new information out of just mutations, which we could go down that route. But I think the much easier route is to
No,
just point out that most species that have existed have gone extinct. Most species don't get the right
again,
mutations in the face of change, and most species go extinct because they face new competition or they're displaced to a new location or there's a natural disaster or humans roll in and poach them or whatever. Like there are a million reasons why a species goes extinct, and most species it is their fate to go extinct.
so if I can just kind of sum up that we're all on the same page, that
Sure.
yes, the vast majority, I think it's like 99% of species go extinct. And this is based off of natural selection, which is based off of differences in population, which is based off of, in the end, mutation, which is probabilistic in your words. Did I sum that up fairly?
Sure.
yeah, I'd be
So
willing to accept it. I have a totally different question.
at base level, we all agree that it is based off of probabilistic mutation in genes. We can agree to that,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So
Probabilistic
then,
random gene. Yeah, that's the mechanism that provides the raw material for evolution. Natural selection select upon it. Yeah.
I can also say that, like,
so
even if, like, we're talking about that, like, you can take mutation, not like, you can take mutation largely out of this because we already know. Are you familiar with patterns of selection?
not entirely, no, sir.
Okay, so I've drawn up a little bell curve here. I don't know. Can you see the screen?
No,
Yeah.
I don't have YouTube on.
It's
He doesn't
fine.
have
So
YouTube
I'm going to
for us.
explain. I'm going to explain it in such a way that the people who can see the screen will see the diagram I've drawn, and you will understand it even if you aren't directly seeing it. But you can go back and check this out later. So we talk about patterns
All
of
right, go ahead.
selection, right? There
Yes,
is
sir.
variation within a population. There's just always going to have some variation in there. Now, that is just because of differences in allele frequencies, right? So take a trait. Like here I've got I've drawn a bell curve. And so the y-axis of the graph is the number of individuals in this population. The x-axis is the variation of that individual trait, whatever trait it may be. So you have any trait you like, there's some variation to that trait. Different numbers of individuals in the population are going to be represented at different points along that gradient, a gradient of or a continuum of variation. So let's say, for example, tail length in arboreal rodents. So we've got some squirrely guys, some chipmunks or something, right? And they've got different chipmunks are rodents, aren't they? I think
Yeah.
they are.
I couldn't tell you.
I'm pretty
They're
sure.
I think they're Sciuridae. So they're like squirrels.
Yeah, you might be
We'll see.
right.
I'll take
arboreal
your word.
mammals of the squeaky variety is what I'm talking about. I cannot remember if they're
Cute.
rodents or not.
Yeah, yes, they
So
are.
we've got
You're good.
awesome. So they've got different tail lengths. So here we've got this bell curve. This is what we call a standard distribution, where this dotted line here I've drawn in the middle is the mean, it's the 50% mark. The vast majority of the population have an average normal tail length. On the ends of tails of this graph, some of this population have short tails. Very few of them have really short tails. Some of them have long tails. Some of them have really long tails, but the majority of them just have normal tails, right? Now, there's snakes up here in this tree, and that means that if these little squeaky dudes can wiggle their big fluffy tail along around like a squirrel can, then they can distract that snake and they're less likely to die. So big tails now have positive selection pressure. Small tails have negative selection pressure. Without any mutation, we are going to see a shift in this graph where now that bell curve is going to start to look like this, where the mean, the average, is shifted over to the long side. And if the graph is going to continue shifting in that direction, then you need new mutation getting longer and longer and longer tail length, or at least you need the allele frequency, even without mutation. You need the allele frequency to line up in such a way that the longer and longer tail length alleles are more frequent, more common within the population. So, this is population genetics, no need to really rely on mutations. This
So
is
I
called
think this is a much
directional
better.
selection.
This is a much
Now, hold
better
on a second.
example than the one I gave.
So this is called directional selection. Now we're going to put the graph back to where it was, and we're going to have a different scenario. Say they do directional selection for a little while, and they get to a certain point where their tails are just long enough that they can distract snakes. But if they're any longer, they get tangled in the branches and the poor little things hang themselves. And if they're any shorter, then they don't distract snakes as well. So now the very middle of the graph is experiencing positive selection pressure. Both ends of the graph have negative selection pressure. So now, again, no mutation necessary. Only with the allele frequency changing, the graph starts to look like this, where the tails get pulled in more and more, and the middle of the graph gets higher and higher as more individuals are falling into that category. This is called stabilizing selection. So this again, no mutation necessary, still change in a population, change in the phenotype and genotype of that population. So now we're going to do one more. We're going to reset the graph again, and we're going to say that these little dudes that have really short tails, they're able to get into holes faster. And the ones who have really long tails are able to evade snakes. And so now both ends of the graph have positive selection pressure. The center of the graph has negative selection pressure. The extremes on both ends are the ones that are now being selected for and have a fitness advantage. Again, no mutation necessary. We are now going to see this graph develop like this into a bimodal distribution where the center of the graph is what is falling down, and we get two new spikes on either end. This is called disruptive selection. So that is three different patterns of selection that you don't actually even need mutation for. You can just work within the allele frequency of the existing population, altering that allele frequency, producing totally different phenotypes. That is evolution by natural selection without the need for mutations, without the need for any kind of perfection, without any randomness involved whatsoever.
Okay. So one, I would just like to say this is a much better example than the one I gave. So thank you for
Thank you.
that. Two, I think this is going to be my big sticking point. How are there different lengths of tails on the x-axis? How did that occur?
Allele frequency.
How did that occur?
He wants to
There's
know how the
variation.
variation shows up in the first place, which is mutation, which is
Variation
probabilistic
which
slash
mutation,
random, which
is based
is
off of
the God.
randomness.
There we
So
there
at
we
the end, you're saying it doesn't involve mutation, but in the very first step, assigning that x-axis, that is all based off of mutation.
So,
So
Gohan, I
then
think the sticking
is
point,
the
though, is that you go ahead,
I'm
Forrest.
sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, is the argument then that that the variation in the phenotype is impossible? That it is impossible to have
Oh,
mutations add new variation to the phenotype.
no, no. The argument is seeing that mutations happen and knowing that the vast majority of mutations either cause no benefit or harm. My question is, how did we get lucky enough to get life to evolve? So, I mean, this is going beyond um,
I'm going to start
the
getting into
origin
different
of
types of
life. This is
mutations now.
more. This is more of like a. Have you seen The Price is Right? Sometimes you just need the perfect drop on a Plinko chip to make it fall
Mm.
exactly where it's going to go. This is that
Right.
argument.
And
I mean,
all of the
Forrest, if
mutations
I
that
know,
were. Sorry, go ahead,
I
Erica. What are you thinking?
no, no, I think that this is going to. I think we could sit here and we could go through every type of mutation. We could sit here and talk about how you get new information. We could sit and talk about the wondrous ways that we've observed this in the lab and in the wild. But I think that genuinely that's a waste of time. Because I think what this is going to
I
boil down
agree.
to from Gohan's perspective is that he's going to have an argument that I will go ahead and say, Gohan, like, I feel like it's an argument from incredulity, right? You're going to say, like, what are the odds that you get all of these, wonderfully complex situations in force? And I will present an example of a feasible pathway or a time that we've seen it happen in the lab or in the wild. And you're saying, yeah, but what about all of the other ones? And then we're going to go through that again and again and again. And it boils down to you don't find it compelling, and I feel like my response to that is, then you're not looking hard enough. You're
No,
not reading up on
I do
this
find
enough.
it.
Oh,
I
sorry, say
do
again.
believe in evolution. I do
Yeah,
find
yeah,
it
yeah,
compelling. I do believe in
for
evolution.
sure,
I
for
do
sure. And
think
Gohan,
that these
like my
mutations cause, but I don't think these mutations were. I mean, it's so unbelievable that it happened to benefit, and the vast majority of the time, it's either no benefit or detrimental to the organism and species. So yes, it
So
happened. I think it's established fact that it happened, but just
chill.
based
Glad
on
we're on the same
odds,
page.
are
I think the
are there
Plinko
any
chip has been dropped personally.
are there any chihuahuas in the wild in nature? Go on.
I think if they were, they'd be somebody's lunch pretty soon.
So, yeah, the answer is no. There are no natural chihuahuas. Chihuahuas, like all dog breeds, are the result of artificial selection, which is the exact same process of natural selection, mutation, and selection. Only the positive selection pressure is humans like it, and the negative selection pressure is humans don't like it. So we have
Sure,
wolves, right? And eventually, after tens of thousands of years, we have from those wolves chihuahuas. There were no
sure.
Chihuahua alleles present in the original wolf population. There were no alleles in those wolves for tiny little legs and stupid little heads and obnoxious little barks and horrible, vibrating, disgusting rat monsters. And none of
Forrest,
that existed.
he's gonna say that we did that, so it's intelligently designed, right? So like that we
Well,
were the
that's
ones
Well,
that direct.
um, close, because
I
I don't even think we could do that. I'm gonna say is that let's say we didn't have a Chihuahua, but our end goal was to create an exact Chihuahua. The only way to get there would be by lucky happenings of mutation to get there. There's no way we could try to get there because mutation is random. So no, I
what
don't
I'm
think
telling
even if
you
we
No, that's not true. What I'm telling you is that in that original wolf population, those alleles weren't there. The alleles we see present in Chihuahuas today are the result of random mutation followed by non random selection. So when you
did
include
we
non random
control the
selection, the mutations can be as random as you like. There will inevitably be a pattern in them because random things naturally produce patterns all the damn time. And you will have selection pressure guiding you in one way. That's the directional selection I was talking about earlier, until you get to the point where you want, which then causes stabilizing selection, which fixes that gene in place amongst the population. So, yeah, you can reliably produce anything you like, as has been regularly done in laboratory experiments for decades.
so you're saying we can control the randomness by selection pressure.
No, the randomness is always there at the exact same rate forever. And we can reliably
Okay.
and predictably control that and harness it to produce whatever phenotype
By
we like.
selection. Yeah. So pretty much what I said.
Because
But
there will always be variation within a population. The
you
only way
can't
you can
control what
stop
that
evolution is
variation
through
is.
Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium.
You can't control what that what that randomness is going to go to. It's going to go to something, sure, but you can't control what it's going to go to. If we try
You,
to again create a chihuahua with selection pressures, it doesn't mean we're going to get what we want. The selection pressures could just stop. We could always try to get maybe a
will
smaller dog, but maybe the males don't mutate to a smaller dog the next time.
will
And
there be a variation in the population of dogs in terms of height?
yeah, but maybe not to a chihuahua.
Will breeding
Can't
the
control.
smallest dogs produce a new population of smaller dogs?
Yes,
Will there be a variation in that population in terms of height?
yes, depending
Will
on
breeding
allele
the
change.
smallest dogs produce smaller dogs?
Depending on allele change, which you can't control.
That's not what I asked you. There is variation in the
Okay, so
population in terms of height, and if you breed the smallest dogs together, you will produce a new population of smaller dogs, correct?
if you breed the smaller dogs together, you are more likely to do that, but that is not a given.
You
I'm
will.
a gibbon.
Nice.
Yes, you are a given.
Huh.
That
Yeah,
Listen,
was a very
you
good
I
comment. I
will
really,
like it.
because
No,
I
you
really
can't
think,
control that. You can't
I really
control
think,
how the
Gohan, like
genes of the next
the
generation is going to mutate.
the right. So the issue here is pretty clear, right? It's Gohan's got this issue with the types of mutations that show up because he's got no problem with selection, he's got no problem with drift, he's got no problem with artificial selection, he's got no problem with gene flow. It's the mutations and more specifically the types of mutations because and correct me if I'm wrong, Gohan, but the types of mutations that he feels are required to get to the species and the diversity that we need are simply too unlikely to show up in the first place. Even if we're talking about the original mutations that provide populations of organisms with very baseline variation, he feel like we're talking origin of sexual reproduction type because obviously the types of variation that we have from natural variants in alleles descends from a very long lineage. That's the sticking point, and I don't think we're going to be able to convince him because what he's basically arguing is look at the trees, right? It's too complex. Look at the diversity of
right.
organisms that we have
Well,
today.
well, well,
Random chance couldn't get us there. And we could show again, I'm sorry to like beat this dead horse, but it's like we could show you examples of exactly that happening, but I don't think it would be good enough. I think that you would still maintain that it's like, okay, I could sit here and give you the example from earlier where it's like we evolve a de novo protein in ice fish that gives their blood the property of antifreeze. That's phenomenal. That's incredible. That's amazing. But you might say something like, yeah, but that's not going to get you a new body plan. Or, yeah, but it's still an ice fish. You know what I mean? It's like, I love that you accept evolution. I think that's great. And, if you find a way to harmonize it with your faith, like at the end of the day, as long as you're down with teaching evolution, that I'm glad we agree at least on that. But I find your argument from incredulity um, unconvincing as something that is going to make me feel like evolution is not capable simply because I've seen over and over again too many times that it is.
Yeah.
sure. So I think you're fairly close. If it would clear it up, my argument is pretty much a intelligent design argument or a fine tuning argument for the universe, just apply to evolution. So it's
Theistic
fine
evolution.
tuning.
God, yeah, God drove evolution. We've heard it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like
So I think
at the
it's
end of
just
the day,
fine tuned
this is
evolution.
sure. At
And
the end of the day,
sorry,
though,
Ms.
this is
Marta.
I was just going to say, at the end of the day, this is indistinguishable from regular evolution. And so, like, if you want to believe that, that's fine. Like, again, I love my theistic evolutionist friends. We get along great. We work in the department together, and everything's fine. And we can sort of meet in the middle on the things that we do accept about how science works the way that it is. They typically say something like evolution's this wonderful mechanism that's put into place, like the many laws that govern other STEM fields, which is phenomenal, awesome. Glad we agree on all of that. But the problem is, and the reason why you're never going to convince somebody like me and Forrest with something like this argument, is because one, we just, as I said earlier, have seen too many times that evolution is capable of creating much. But two, it's simply indistinguishable from naturalistic evolution. There's no way to tell the difference, right? One thing that I always find troubling when I argue with, and I know I'm not saying that you are this type of person, Gohan, because everything that we've said so far seems to indicate that you're not. But when I disagree with intelligent design advocates, and people who are, young earth creationists or old earth creationists, where they believe that God like creates these archetypal kinds and then you get some level of variation within those kinds, my qualm is always, how do you tell the difference between when evolution is working naturalistically versus when God has to step in and tinker, right? Did God step in with our
Can I take
transketolase
a
like
shot at
one
that?
gene? Yeah.
Okay, so I would say if the way evolution occurred was not as either random or if it was not as likely to cause harm or be non-beneficial. So if I think it's like maybe 1% of mutations are beneficial. If that number rose to like 10%, okay, now we're in business. Now you know what? Maybe the odds are in our favor. Or
But I
if
think
it's like
what you don't appreciate there, Gohan, is that yeah, mutate like beneficial mutations are rare, but our sample size is freaking gigantic in the size of the genome,
Mhm.
in the organisms that are present. These things are
matter,
evolving in
it's
parallel.
abundant.
You don't need one. It's not a direct correlation where one single mutation leads to one desirable outcome. There are many different ways to get a specific biochemical interaction or a different body plan or whatever, whatever, whatever. So it's like I don't find that convincing as a way to tell the difference.
And sorry, I'm also want to say I'm not trying to convince either of you two. I'm really just trying to see how I'm wrong. And I was excited to talk to you guys today when I heard you were both biologists. Forrest, I knew you were a biologist already, so I was happy to talk about this today because I haven't. I mean, I'm a. I work with physical therapy, and I mean
Mhm.
we do technically biology, but it's not like on a level where we get asked big questions like this. I don't get to
Oh, Gohan,
talk
it
about
seems like
big
So
questions. That's my like.
your
So
argument
I
is
appreciate.
basically like yeah, it seems like you could apply your exact same argument to like anything in science that feels too good to be true. And you could just be like, well,
Mhm.
that seems inconceivable to me. Therefore, like God did it, right? It's indistinguishable from naturalistic evolution, except there's some level of incredulity that you've applied to the situation and decided that that's the gap evolution from a naturalistic perspective can't cross. Therefore, God did it, but exactly in the same way that
So
naturalistic evolution would.
I
I
also want to
wanted
point out,
to.
like
I've heard
you
this.
a minute ago, Erica was talking about the massive sample size, and you said I heard you saying something about like it doesn't matter, whatever. Like it super does because when we're talking about you said 1% of mutations are advantageous. I think it's something I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's like a couple 100,000 novel mutations per generation, right? So, like, if we're talking about 1% of them, that's huge. And that's just talking about our genome. There's plenty of things with larger genomes than ours, which are going to accrue more mutations as that is copied. And if we're talking about just take the population of the planet, right? If I say 1% of people are going to, shit themselves until they explode, 1%, a tiny amount, but with the population of the planet, that's 80 million people. 80 million people shitting themselves until they explode is a huge fucking deal. And it doesn't matter that it's 1%.
That's
And
one
so if we're
percent of
talking
them.
about the countless millions of species on this planet with billions between them. There are more ants on this planet at this point than there have ever been humans. And so we're talking about these countless billions of organisms out here. Yeah, 1% of mutations, even if that is something that we can agree on, that only 1% are beneficial, which I don't agree with that, but whatever. That is still an
That's fair.
absolutely absurd amount of mutations that are very beneficial and are going to improve the species. And with the rate at which many species reproduce, especially in our selected species, you're going to see that play out into a serious change in a very little bit of time.
So, Forrest, I think I'm going to try to use your argument against you. You
Please.
said it goes from uh, what was it, 8 billion to 8 million or something like that.
80. So 1% of the global
80.
population is 80 million people.
What's 1% of that? Because evolution's not a one-time thing. Mutations happen each generation. So each time you're losing 99%, if it's not all detrimental, most of it is non-beneficial. So let's just say it's all
That's not how
detrimental
statistics work.
because we lost 99%. All right, now you're left with 8 million. You're 99% less than that. And then keep doing that each time there's a mutation. If, again, I know
That
it's
is
wrong
not
that
how
mutation
it
is
works
90.
at all. Because the other
Okay.
99% don't stop reproducing or die. It's not like there's a one-time chance at it. And also, the mutations we're talking
Well, you,
about
you cut
aren't
the
just in
numbers
any
down.
somatic cell. The mutations we're talking about are in germ cells. So you're releasing several million sperm with each ejaculation. That's a lot of different mutation chances that all are going to get into one ovum, one sperm. Meanwhile, you could have sex 30 times a day for the rest of your life and have all sorts of children. So it's not just a 1% on each individual generation. That's not how that works at all, especially, again, not in our selected species. Our selected
Sorry,
species, for those who don't
I
know,
was
by
going
the
off
way,
of what you said.
you're going off of
Okay,
what I
so
said. That's not what I said in any way.
I thought you said our numbers got cut down to 8. I don't. You know what? It's 12:30. I don't remember what you said, but 80,000. Is that what you said? Is that what our numbers got cut
80
down to
million.
somehow?
I didn't
80
say
million.
anything
So
got
how
cut
did our
down.
numbers get cut
I
down
said
to 80?
I said an incidence rate of 1% in the global population equates to
Uh,
80 million people. I didn't say it
Sorry, I
cuts down the
thought in this.
population in any way.
Uh, that's my bad. I thought in this example we were saying it got cut down to 80 million. Okay, that was my
No.
bad.
But
I
what's
Okay.
go
really
on. You go ahead, Forrest.
sorry, go ahead.
I could
No,
ramble.
no,
I keep rambling
mine
about
was a
different things. So
mine was a very completely different train. So if you're where we're at right now, I'd rather hear from you than me.
I'm really not. I mean, I was gonna make one last cherry on top on like the this is just an argument from incredulity to sort of, you know, this isn't the right way of putting it, but it is 12:30, and so I'm feeling a little bit like this is the way it is right now. Like you're sort of shoehorning God into like the process because you can, I guess. Like it's like it feels incredulous to you, so it's like might as well. Um, I
I
have talked
say
to theistic evolutionists many times and agreed that evolution is a much more elegant solution if you're the god of the universe than creationism. I do believe that. I think that's great, and they again can't praise enough that you're being science affirming on this. That's awesome. The problem is like again, I've yet to hear from you a way to distinguish when this process is naturalistic versus when God is intervening, one. And two, when God is intervening seems like, from your perspective, it is completely dictated by when you feel like that just seems really unlikely. So, maybe God had to intervene here, or maybe God had to intervene there, and then it's like He's using this wonderful, borderline miraculous process of evolutionary change over time to keep biodiversity up and running, but then He has to come in and like tinker every now and again, but also you can't tell from a biological perspective when the tinkering took place and when it was naturalistic. It's like that doesn't jive with me. I think if you're going to take the theistic evolutionist perspective, the better way of doing it is to just say evolution's a wonderful process that keeps life moving and shaking. God put it into place, and it's been acting out ever since then. And then also all of the other religious things that you might believe can play around and be active there as well. Like I don't
I
I
think
don't
that's
see a
a
reason to
good.
straddle the line between idea and this.
Hmm.
I like this line of questioning. One, I would like to say three things. One, I don't believe this is a God of the gaps. I know you're not saying that, or you didn't say that. You might be thinking that. I'm not sure, but I don't believe this is a God of the gaps. God of the gaps is usually the more I don't know, the more I plug in God. This is the more I learn about evolution, the more I learn about science, the more I feel like it points towards God instead of away. So the more I learn, the more I'm like my arrow is going towards God, and I don't know how to help that, which is kind of why I call it. The second thing I was going, it's 12:40. I
So
forgot the
like
second thing I was going to say.
it's fine. The thing for me, Gohan, is that like it. I understand you literally just said it's not the God of the gaps. It's what this is pointing to. But at the end of the day, the argument does hinge on I've learned a tiny bit about evolution, and it seems a bit improbable. Therefore, I think there is this God that's doing it, and that is by definition the god of the gaps. It's not the worst kind. It's not the god of the gaps that most people do, but that is what that is. And what's frustrating for me is that you're calling in saying that what you have on the call screen here is an evolutionary argument for Christianity. So it's not even
Yeah,
just God of the gaps. What you're calling in is not, hey, I think the mutation rate is a little bit unreasonable to me, and I think there might be something else going on there that would explain this. You're not even saying, hey, this mutation rate's a little bit crazy. I think there's something supernatural going on. What you're actually saying, and what you haven't been upfront about, is this mutation rate doesn't make sense to me. Therefore, there's a guy who doesn't want you having butt sex and doesn't think women should teach and doesn't want you can't touch the skin of a dead pig and also slavery's cool. Like that's the whole thing, is that it's this specific god from the specific religion, the specific interpretation, the specific translation, the specific version of the specific holy book that you prefer, and you're trying to smuggle all of that in with just, hey, I don't really understand how mutation rates work. It's not
okay.
just, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Therefore, there's a guy that runs the universe, and there was a blood sacrifice in Palestine 2,000 years ago, and that means that you are going to burn in a pit if you don't believe me. And like it's a very expensive claim you're making with very, very, very little justification.
So, one, I do now remember what I was going to say, but I do want to respond to you, Forrest, really quick. I
Please.
think this is why I was talking about shapes first, because no, my belief in Christianity is not based on science alone, not based on history alone, or any of the individual letters alone. But when you combine
Well, that's what you
shape,
put in the call screen.
yes, it is. So the second thing I was going to say, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have said evolution in support of Christianity. I should have said evolution in support of theism. I think when I first started talking on this phone call, I corrected it to theism. So I think I realized my mistake. I'm sorry. I should not have told the Carl Cole screener about it being for Christianity. I should have been less
Sure.
specific, saying how it should have gone towards theism. If I'm going to talk about Christianity, I have to talk about all of shapes together. Or, I mean, I could talk
Okay.
individually, but each one is only going to get you so far. To get to Christianity, I
Well,
think you
then
need all of it together.
I will ask my gracious and exceedingly tall co-host, do you want to get into Christianity, or do you think in these 47 minutes we've covered what we need to cover?
I mean,
I
so
want,
here's the thing, Gohan. If you'd called, and I know you did, and there was an issue. If you'd called a while back and like I was like top level energy, and we didn't have 6 pages of super chats to read, I would be like, fuck it, let's do the full
good
gamut, because
luck.
I do have perspectives on the shape. I as you said, personal experience. I think that's less important, but I would think that argument for morality. I love getting into that kind of stuff, and
That's hard
history
with
is,
Christianity.
yeah, that's
Add,
why I would want to get into it, but. I will go ahead and say that, our in the interest of the audience, our audience has been dropping as it's been getting later and later. And I want to make sure that everybody who sent in a super chat gets to hear it read. So I think because I'm so tall and large and like enormous and imposing, I might have to
Mhm.
pull the co-host, please call back next time Forrest and I are together, and we will get into the full of the shape, the whole shape.
Yeah, shape it
I
on
don't
up.
think I usually call whenever my kids aren't here. So uh,
Yeah.
Well,
that's what I do
Forrest
in
and I
my free
always
time.
go
But
for we always go for millions and millions of hours. So,
Mhm.
literally, if you call in next time we're on together, and we're not infrequently on together, so call back and we can like dissect it, you know, bit by bit. I just, in the interest of super chats more than anything else, just because they're
I mean,
Yep.
if there's a
still
way to like
coming
continue to
in.
another day offline, that'd be cool too.
Yes,
But um,
that sounds amazing.
I, I want to say one last thing. You were talking about tinkering before. It doesn't have to be tinkering, although that is a possible example. My example was a clean code drop. It's just the perfect drop when the whole system is set up. He just drops it, and now it's done.
Yeah, your example works when your example works, but unfortunately, your example does not fit reality. So I understand that, again,
It
it's
may
that
it
is
may
the
not.
script you're reading off of. That is the script you're reading off of, and we all agree with that. But it's not functional.
It
To
may
me,
be
it's kind of like
functional, it may
being
not
like
be.
I believe.
You're saying no.
To me, that's like that's like saying I believe God instituted the Big Bang. Like he snaps his fingers, and when
Yes.
Genesis
Yeah.
says "Let there be light," what he's meaning is the Big Bang. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
if you say that and that's your perspective, that's fine. But like that's not something I can't investigate that with science. That's an
You
interesting
can.
perspective to have. But it's like it's kind of it's just so. It's like it's naturalist. It
No, you
feels
can't.
like you're taking the entire naturalistic perspective and just saying this exact thing, but with God, which is chill until you say, and also it points in that direction, right? It's not like, oh, I'm making these two things work together. They're harmonious with one another, in my opinion. It's saying they're not just harmonious. Science is literally indicative of deism, of theism in general, which I don't know that I think is a compelling argument to make. But as chat has said, I'm
That's
punking out at 7 hours, so we got to move on to super chats. Is my opinion.
Lame.
That's awesome.
I'm vibrating.
I can
I am-
see that.
Yeah, it's a problem. But both of my legs are currently going. If I put my hands on my knees right now, this is what you're seeing. This is what's happening right now. If I
bet
stiff
there's
arm it, it's actually worse if I just keep my arms stiff. Do I what?
Do you have like restless leg? Do you have restless leg syndrome where you're just like bouncing off the walls all the time?
Yes, but that is not
that
what's
might
so
be a
restless leg
mutation.
syndrome. It's not. So restless leg syndrome, as far as I understand it, is specifically about like when you're trying to rest and like relax and your legs won't let you. And I do have
I didn't know
that.
that.
Me vibrate.
I thought it was just
I think
fidgetiness.
I could be wrong because I've been fidgety my entire. Go on, we're going to let you go because you're just sitting here having to listen to us talk. Have an awesome rest of your day. Thank you so much for waiting so long. We hope
Have
your
a
call
good
is
night.
nice. Okay?
Good
Good night. Bye bye.
Hey, like a subscriber, Jimmy will have to go on a polyamorous dating show to win some prize money.
Wait, I want to do that. So also hit like and subscribe, and then go to patreon.com/calltheline. I was trying to make you laugh and ruin the take. That's why that silly face earlier. If I was on a polyamorous dating show, I would just choose everybody. Except Frederick. Leave a comment.